You open your banking app. A number appears. That number is supposed to mean something. You trust it completely. But almost nobody who trusts it could tell you what it actually is. Here's the strange part. Money isn't a thing. It never really was. It's an agreement. But the real answer is far stranger than an agreement between friends. It's an agreement between total strangers, most of whom will never meet, all pretending the same story is true at the same time. Think about that for a second. You hand someone a piece of paper. They hand you a coffee. Neither of you questions why this works. Why does it work? The anthropologist David Graeber spent years studying the origins of money and debt. He found something that surprised almost everyone in his field. The old textbook story, that money was invented to replace clumsy barter systems, doesn't hold up. Ancient communities didn't trade 3 chickens for a goat. They kept track of who owed what. Memory was the first currency. Trust was the technology. That's worth sitting with. Money didn't start as metal. It started as memory. But memory has a problem. It fades. It gets disputed. 2 people remember a debt differently, and suddenly you need a judge, a king, or a priest to settle it. So societies built something more durable than memory. They built symbols, shells, salt, silver, gold. Gold won for a strange reason. Not because it was useful. You can't eat it, farm with it, or build a house from it. Gold won because it was rare, hard to fake, and impossible to create more of on a whim. Scarcity became trust. Trust became value. For thousands of years, that was the whole system. A society finds something scarce, agrees it matters, and organizes its entire economic life around defending that agreement. Then paper money arrived, and something shifted. A piece of paper isn't scarce. Anyone with a printing press can make more of it. So paper money needed a new kind of trust. Not trust in the material. Trust in an institution. A government. A central bank. And for most of modern history, that trust held. Until it didn't. In certain places. At certain moments. When governments printed too much, and the paper in people's pockets quietly became worth less every single day. Now picture a computer scientist in the early 1990s asking a question nobody else was asking. What if you could bring back the scarcity of gold without needing gold at all? His name was Nick Szabo. Long before Bitcoin existed, he designed something called BitGold, a digital system meant to be scarce the way gold is scarce, verified by computation instead of by a king's stamp or a bank's ledger. It never fully launched, but the idea didn't die. It waited. Then, in 2008, in the middle of a global financial crisis, when banks were collapsing and governments were quietly printing enormous amounts of new money to stop the bleeding, someone using the name Satoshi Nakamoto published a 9-page document online. Nobody knew who Nakamoto really was. Nobody still does. But the document proposed something that had never fully existed before. Money with no king, no bank, no printing press, just math, and a network of strangers keeping each other honest. Here's where it gets genuinely strange. How do you make something digital scarce? A photo can be copied infinitely. A song can be copied infinitely. Why can't money be copied the same way? The answer is a shared ledger, spread across thousands of computers, that everyone can see and nobody can secretly edit. It's called a blockchain, not a bank vault, not a database owned by one company. A record, copied everywhere, agreed upon by consensus, updated only when the majority of the network verifies a transaction is real. Imagine a classroom where every student keeps an identical copy of the same notebook. If you try to sneak in and change a number in your notebook alone, it doesn't matter. Every other notebook still says the old number. You'd have to convince and rewrite the majority of every notebook in the room simultaneously. As the room grows to millions of people, that becomes practically impossible. That's the trick. That's the entire trick. Bitcoin doesn't need you to trust a person. It needs you to trust math and numbers, spread across a crowd too large to secretly control. And there's a second layer to the scarcity. Only 21 million Bitcoin will ever exist. Not 21 million and one. Not a number some committee can vote to raise during a crisis. 21 million, coded in from the very beginning, verified by every computer on the network, forever. Compare that to gold, still being mined out of the earth in unpredictable amounts. Compare that to paper currency, printed in amounts decided behind closed doors. For the first time, humans built a form of money whose entire supply was mathematically fixed before a single unit was ever created. Economists have debated this for over a decade. Some, like Nobel laureate Paul Krugman, have publicly doubted whether something with no physical form and no government backing could ever function as real money. Others argue that's exactly the point. It was never meant to look like old money. It was meant to solve old money's oldest weakness, the temptation, held by every human institution in history, to create more of it whenever it becomes convenient. Here's the modern mirror. You already live inside abstractions you don't fully see. The number in your banking app isn't cash sitting in a vault somewhere with your name on it. It's an entry in a database, one your bank could theoretically freeze, delay, or adjust. You've simply trusted that database your entire life, the same way ancient villagers trusted the notches on a debt tally, because the alternative, doubting the whole system, is exhausting. Bitcoin asks a different question. What if trust didn't have to sit in one institution's hands at all? What if it could sit in code, visible to anyone, alterable by no one? That question is why it went from a 9-page paper nobody read to a system now used, debated, and argued over by millions of people across nearly every country on Earth. Not because it's simple, it isn't, but because it touches something ancient in how humans have always related to value, scarcity, trust, agreement between strangers. Somewhere back in a village that no longer exists, people kept a shared memory of what was owed and by whom. Somewhere in a data center tonight, a network of strangers is doing almost exactly the same thing, just with silicon instead of memory, and math instead of a village elder's word. You open your banking app. A number appears. It feels solid. It feels obvious. But it never really was either of those things. It was always a story, agreed upon by strangers, waiting for someone to write a stranger one.